Well, welcome everybody to this webinar. Today we'll be talking about facilitating feedback practices online among students. We'll be showcasing a very specific use case that took place in Georgia State University. But I suggest before we kick off, maybe let's just wait a couple of minutes for everybody to arrive. I know there was a small issue with the Google Meets versus Zoom link, but I'm hoping everybody will find his or her way. But in the meantime, maybe Moses, we can just discuss a couple of personal experiences. You've been a student, I've been a student. How was it for you to collaborate with other students within your course design?
Well, and there were many different ways of collaboration. So we had my specific case, right? So I studied at a business school. Funny enough that I ended up here in pedagogy, but I studied at a business school, and a lot of my assignments were collaboration, right? So we were collaborating with group members, group work, as in business schools, that is quite a prominent factor. And I think every semester we had a group project with a different subject, whether it was finance, economics, and we had to always deliver a group deliverable, so to speak, a report. And, you know, depending on the group that you had, there was always a bit of a fight over, okay, who was going to turn into my group member? And there was always a bit of weird stuff going on there, right? So you have some of the kids who were much more studious, who would jump on and make sure, oh, I want to be with that group member. And I feel like you kind of lost out, and many different students, I feel, lost out on the opportunity to learn from one another, right? So if you're only with students who think similarly to you and you only get put with them, then it's going to be a very different group work experience, which I think is almost half of the experience there if you're with your friends. So that being in mind, I think it was important for me that when I was in a different group, learning how to work with those other students was one of the most valuable experiences I had. Learning how to take different types of people and come together and work together to deliver this project.
Yeah, with you. And I guess it all comes down to those 21st century skills, which are all over the news nowadays. Yeah. Higher order learning skills, things that you can bring with yourself and actually apply when you enter the job market after university, yeah, working in a group. Wonderful. Thanks for that personal experience, Moses. With that, absolutely, I suggest we start this webinar. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We are from Feedback Fruits. Today, we'll be talking about how you can better enhance feedback practices in an online environment with your students, and we'll be showcasing a specific use case from one of our partners, Georgia State University. But first, a bit of housekeeping. The agenda: why are we sitting in this webinar? Why feedback practices are relevant? How can Feedback Fruits bring value? We'll walk you through the specific use case around this group work and the feedback strategies that Georgia State University applied. After that, we'll demonstrate our software solution live on our screen, and also we'll talk a bit about some experiences that partners of Feedback Fruits had with us. Now, something that in the past couple of days have been very wonderful is a lot of engagement in our webinars. This is not the first time we are doing it. We oftentimes receive a lot of questions in the chat box, a lot of use cases from instructors, educators on how you facilitate feedback practices in your courses. I would appreciate that interaction to keep going. And with that, let's kick off. So the reason why we decided to host this session is there is robust data and a large amount of academic research on why it's important to facilitate group work and also give feedback to each other in a peer-to-peer setting at universities. One of the reasons is it allows students to tackle more complex problems than what they could essentially tackle on their own. Also, they have to learn how to give and receive feedback, how to develop stronger communication skills and foster collaboration, how to understand group dynamics and really spot free riders. Now, this is something that the literature told us, that research told us, but also there is something that we learned from universities recently. Moses, do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, what we learned based on our own literature review, as well as our own experiences working with institutions, was that the learning experience of a student, this is becoming the The new, whether it's new or not, that is a question, of course, maybe it was in the past as well, but this has become much more prominent and coming into the forefront as a selling point for students when deciding where they want to study. So funny enough, we look on the left, you might say, oh, look at that student, she doesn't seem like she's having a great time. That is exactly what we are aiming at addressing. We want to change the learning experience being from a dull and a bit more monotonous kind of experience to something a bit more engaging and active for the students. So this is something where we want to ask you, this is a great time for you to engage with us and ask some questions. So what sort of feedback practices do you currently use in your own courses, specifically online?
Yeah, and here to elaborate a little bit, this can be, students working on a deliverables, on a research paper, an assignment that they hand in, and then they review each other, they give feedback on that specific assignment. Or it can be what comes afterwards, group member evaluation. How was the group participation, the skills of the students, the collaborative environment? So yeah, feel free to drop any use cases, any questions. I'll keep an eye on this chat box. And then Moses, I think it's time to tell a bit also about feedback fruits, and then after that, how to apply that to the pedagogical use case.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. Thanks for that transition. So you might be wondering, of course, who are we? Who is Feedback Fruits, and why should you be listening to us in this specific scenario? So what we do, just a quick overview, is we co-create and develop digital pedagogy tools. And these tools add a pedagogical layer over course design for faculty to use within the LMS, entirely intuitive and fully integrated. Now you see above, we have a big cluster of little circles. Now this represents all the different tools that we have, which represents 14 different learning solutions. Now, we have a little basket of fruits, our tools. And what you will also see above is some of the biggest learning management system out there. Now, my guess is that your learning management system is actually in that little box. Now, we integrate with an LTI 1.3 integration, as well as an API with all of the above listed learning management systems. So this allows for group synchronization, so the teachers do not have to manually allocate groups. This allows for grade synchronization, so grades getting pushed back and forth between our tool and the learning management system, as well as calendars. So this allows it to sync as well. So this is part of the learning experience we want to facilitate. Now, this is one of my favorite little drawings as well. Now, on the left side, we can see the cart and the horse, the cart representing the technology and the horse being the pedagogy. So in the past, we've seen in many cases that often the technology is existing to deliver specific pedagogies. However, the pedagogy is having to mold itself to fit pre-existing technology, and it's technology driven. Now, we, on the other hand, as you can see from the right side with this lovely green check mark, is that we believe that the pedagogy should come first, and the technology should therefore then be designed around the pedagogy which we want to facilitate. This is something that we intrinsically like to we value within our companies. It's one of our values, simple enough. And this is why we work specifically with institutions who allow us to be the technological means for their pedagogical goals.
Moses, sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to mention that we have one of the most active webinars so far. We got like 2 use cases and 1 question in like 3 minutes. I'm really excited to address those, but maybe first you could just summarize what type of tools we have.
Yeah, that's a good one. So Feedback Fruits, we cover 3 different, let's say, sorts of tools. On the left side, we have feedback and assessment tools. Now, with these 6 tools, we like to practice what we preach, Feedback Fruits. The majority of our tools are feedback and peer assessment tools. The next one are collaborative learning tools, which allow the students to collaborate on learning and study material in an asynchronous online format. The last one being synchronous learning with an interactive presentation, a team-based learning tool, as well as a quiz tool. Now we know that quiz has been quite popular as well. Now, next slide. Today, we're going to focus on the self and peer assessment tools, as well as the peer feedback tools, both asynchronous.
Yeah, thanks, Moses. Now to tell a little bit about which specific tools are about feedback. One of them is what we call peer review. This is a tool that you can use when you want to encourage your students to give feedback to each other on certain deliverables, so on assignments. And we also have group member evaluation, which comes down to group collaboration skills, the collaborative environment, so a little bit more on the soft skill side of things. And that's something I'm really happy to see that came in as a note from an anonymous attendee. It's always a challenge to grade the so-called soft skills of students, especially in large groups. We'll make sure to give a reflection on how this perspective took place in the Georgia State University. Now, what instructional designers, instructional technologists oftentimes highlight that they like about these tools is, some things you can find on the screen. It allows you to close the feedback loop, so students can always rate their reviewers. There is an inbuilt group synchronization between the learning management system and the tool. So it saves you from doing a lot of tedious and manual work. We have a double-blinded anonymity, which means if you want to create a safe and secure feedback environment, you can either decide to turn on anonymity for the reviewer or for the reviewee, or for both of them. And we always provide learner analytics for the instructors, so they can intervene when and where necessary in this whole feedback process. A little bit about security and accessibility. Feedback Fruits is located in the EU, in the Netherlands, so we are GDPR compliant, FERPA compliant. Important to mention that our partners are essentially distributed all around the world, many of them in the US. Accessibility standards, and we make sure that our platform is secure. Now we'll be talking about a use case that one of our partners, Georgia State University, implemented using Feedback Fruits around, hey, how to streamline effective group member evaluation in an asynchronous setting. Oftentimes we hear terminologies like blended learning, hybrid learning, online learning. If these terms resonate with you, then maybe this is the right time to shine. Moses, do you want to explain a bit of the context?
Absolutely. So let's look at this from four different ways, right? So context, obviously this is the reason you all came to this webinar here, was for Georgia State University and how they experienced their successful use case for Feedback Fruits. So obviously this is with Georgia State University. This was a master's finance course, and which had an average class size of 50 students, which had an asynchronous delivery method. Now, the motivation for this, number one, they wanted to eliminate free writing in group work. They wanted to create a safe and comfortable feedback environment. And they wanted to hone lifelong skills and prepare students for the real world, all while saving time and manual work while designing the course with multiple assignments. So they really wanted to look for something to enhance the group learning components within this assignment.
And looking at the chat window again, and also point number 4, one of the attendees mentions that she or he's teaching in a hybrid class, synchronously, asynchronously. And sometimes the students who are studying from home do not meet deadlines and are generally less motivated. Now, something to mention that I think also in this specific use case, there were multiple deadlines. So there was a kind of waterfall approach from pedagogical perspective, and that's something you can facilitate with Feedback Fruits. In terms of the setup of this use case, the students attended asynchronous sessions and lectures. They were working on several group assignments, and then they had to submit a final presentation, evaluate their group dynamics and contributions. After that, students anonymously reviewed their group members' contribution and collaboration skills. And then they also had to read and reflect on the received feedback. This was actually a graded assignment. So the students got a large chunk of their grade based on the received feedback. In terms of the outcome, we've seen a lot of use cases actually, and this one was specifically outstanding and above average in terms of student satisfaction. Instructors told us they were easily launching learning activities that were previously impossible to facilitate while saving time due to the deep learning management system integration. And the activity also improved the students' collaboration skills and high quality feedback, thus having a positive impact on their future professional success. Moses, do you want to walk us through a couple of testimonials? These are coming from instructional designers and also teachers.
Yes, absolutely. So out of these, the 50 faculty which we had working on this use case, we have some testimonials, some of the quotes and things that they said about us. Number one, they said that Feedback Fruits made team management much easier. Of course, this is what we strive to do. Feedback Fruits was very helpful in making team engagement efficient and effective. The industry judges were highly impressed to see that the final product and high quality of works were presented from the Feedback Fruits tools. And the evaluations from Feedback Fruits help students to become more engaging and responsible. Now, just on a side note here, I was discussing and with one of my colleagues who has been directly in contact with GSU, and she was super excited that we were able to share this use case with you all. She said, "Wow, GSU, they're one of our best partners, and they have such a dedicated and committed central team." So I just wanted to throw that in there as my own experience with the testimonials.
Awesome. And I'm also super happy to read again that one of the comments or questions in the Q&A box resonates with one of the testimonials. So one of our attendees says, Shiri uses Canvas discussions for group work and feedback in a marketing class, wishing that the process was a bit more structured with multiple steps and deadlines preferably. Yeah, I think that resonates with the second testimonial. Oftentimes we hear that instructors decide not to do group work in their LMS simply because it's not really efficient and effective. So thanks for sharing that. It's good to hear that such use case resonates with the larger audience. And with that being said, I'm going to be demonstrating our peer review and group member evaluation tools with the specific use case around feedback practices online asynchronously. Please keep the questions coming. I'll keep an eye on the chat box and on the Q&A. We are really excited to get your perspective and answer all your questions. So I'm going to be logging into a Canvas environment. Please bear in mind that we integrate with most learning management systems, let it be Blackboard, D12, Brightspace, Moodle. So they will all look and feel very similar. I logged in currently as a student, and I'm going to go to the peer review assignment. What you will see is that the tool seamlessly loads within the framework of the LMS, so students do not have to leave this safe and secure environment. I'm going to go full screen mode to avoid myself from getting distracted on social media, for example. Now, what you notice is all the activities within our tools are lined up chronologically, and they all follow a constructive alignment. So here are the learning objectives. The next step are about the actual learning activities. So handing in a group assignment, giving feedback to other groups, reading the received feedback, reflecting on the assignment, and then also the assessment if it's a summative activity with the grading. What we can see is that we are in the same group with Maxwell and Melinda. I'm called Robert in this use case. And important to mention, as we have a deep integration with the learning management system, these groups are automatically synchronized from Canvas. Same for deadlines. That's something that one of you asked in the assignment. You can set up multiple deadlines and they synchronize back to the calendar of the LMS. And also we have essentially a granular grading, a detailed grading, which then pushes back to the gradebook of Canvas. In the first step of the assignment, we hand in a deliverable as a group, which we already did here. Our technology supports all different types of file formats, document, video, audio, presentation, etc., etc. Next is the most relevant part of the assignment, giving feedback to other groups. Now, what you can see on the top of my screen is that we are reviewing a so-called ambitious violet grapes group, which might make you think that this is an anonymous assignment, again, creating a safe and comfortable environment where students can really provide high quality, constructive and direct feedback. So what I'm going to do is I'll open the document that has been put together by another group. As I read through the document, I decide, hey, I might want to give some feedback that is specifically relevant to this paragraph. So I just highlight it. And on the right side, we can see certain evaluation criterion that have been set up by the instructor. So if I feel like this feedback is specifically relevant to the style of the document, I can select that and I can type my feedback in here. Also, what I can do is add a voice note or an attachment next to it to make the learning experience a bit more human, a bit more personal, and note it as a suggestion. I got also a point, I think previously in the chat of this call, which was about the quality of the feedback. It's oftentimes indeed a challenge how to ensure that students provide a high quality feedback to each other. One way to do so is essentially what you just saw on my screen a minute ago. We have automated reminders to students to follow certain suggestions by the teacher. Hey, remember to link this feedback back to the main criteria of the assignment, for example. So that's one example to ensure high quality feedback. As I read through the document, what I can also see is other students already added some feedback. And we find it very important to have the feedback process a little bit more social, collaborative, and dialogue based. So if I feel like I want to ask for further elaboration or I want to give a correction here, I can just essentially type my feedback here and it shows almost in a social media context, which students are already familiar with. Next, I can also review a video. In this case, we attach a specific annotation, a comment, a feedback to a certain point in time, so on the timeline of the video, and I can type my feedback here. Once I finish the review process, I can go to the next step of the assignment, which is reading the received feedback. Now, what you notice here is 10% of the grade of this assignment is available for reading the feedback. This is super important because according to our partners, roughly 85% of students do not actually read the feedback that they receive. So the whole learning activity falls apart. By nudging them, by giving them an incentive to actually read and interact with the feedback, you can ensure that doesn't happen. So what I can see here is an aggregate of all the feedback I got. Here are the individual feedbacks. And I can again ask for further elaboration in a comment. And this reviewer will receive a notification on the top right of the screen to make sure that, yeah, I have clarity on the feedback I received. Last but not least, I also have to reflect on the assignment. So what did I learn from this activity? What would I do differently next time? And then a clear explanation of how my final grade was calculated. I'll look into the chat of this call to make sure that I address all the questions. Can I add the tips myself? How many are there? Yep, I'm going to address that right now from the teacher perspective of this assignment. So just 1 second.
So I think while we're in the middle, I can just give a short answer to this question. So with the group member evaluation tool, for example, we have two different ways to add the tips. Now the tips automatically pop up based on experience with our partners. And can you add the tips yourself? I'm actually not completely sure. That's a good question. And maybe when we get into the tool, we can take a deeper look at that. Now I know with the other tool we're going to show, which is more in line with the use case for Georgia State, the tips are able to be added themselves, but it's going to nudge the student in a better way to say, okay, how high of quality is the feedback, but it's slightly different than what we see here.
Yes,
so thank you for that question.
Thanks for addressing that. I'll try to highlight from the teacher perspective how you can influence these automated tips. So we are looking at the same assignment, but now from the teacher perspective. What you can see is there is a dashboard on the top of the assignment, which essentially gives you real-time analytics on how the students are interacting with this assignment, both on a group and on an individual level. So we can see that Georgia read the instructions, handed in the assignment, started giving feedback, but she's not there yet. So this allows the instructor to intervene before the end of the deadline. I think there was a point in the chat box. Sometimes students who study asynchronously miss certain deadlines and they become unmotivated. Now here, yeah, essentially one way for the teacher to intervene. Here are the instructions. And then what you can do is you can as a teacher, download all the documents that have been uploaded. And in the given review step, you can see an average rating of how certain groups and individuals are rating each other. Now, here is something cool that oftentimes instructional designers tell us this saves a lot of time for instructors in terms of analyzing the aggregate, the overall class performance. Feedback Fritz automatically creates a heat map for you where you can see how students are rating each other on certain perspectives. So on organization, they give 75% to each other on average, and on style, they only give 67%. So this might encourage you to address, let's say, style during your upcoming lecture or webinar to guide your further students. Here is just something I also wanted to show you. There was a question from the group. It's also important to make the group diverse so students can learn more from each other and see different viewpoints. Thank you so much for bringing that in. And also to showcase an example of how the teacher can encourage a diverse feedback conversation. You can go on a specific group's assignment, and you can, as a teacher, see what comments, what ratings the students received. So if you would like to, for example, encourage a more diverse perspective, you can ask for the you can ask the students to elaborate further. Could you elaborate further? So you as a teacher can also join the discussion. Last but not least, you can read the reflections of the students individually. And then there is this granular grading element, which I mentioned. Just with a click of a button, you can push the grades back to the Canvas environment. There was a question, as I remember, related to the deadlines. Now, what you can also do is you can schedule the grades to be pushed back in the learning management system. So, you know, sometimes you have one specific deadline for students handing in the assignment, another specific deadline for reviewing, another one for reading the reviews, writing the reflection, and then there is, of course, the very final deadline of the assignment. That's something you can set up to be scheduled. Briefly showing you how you can set up the assignment and change certain settings. So we have multiple scenarios because we know that sometimes feedback is given between individuals, sometimes it's given between different groups, and sometimes within a group. So that's something you can actually set up in Feedback Fritz. Here is an example of a deadline that you can set up for the first step, a deadline for the second step. Now, what we also very often hear is, hey, I have a certain rubric. I would like to share it with other instructors. So it's a bit more scalable. I don't have to recreate the rubric across different assignments. You can do that on Feedback Fritz. You can set up a rubric, share it with your faculty members, and then they can further edit it. For example, increase or decrease the number of points that can be given, make certain number of comments required. So we are making sure that there is scalability, but there is also customizability. So it's suitable for each and every pedagogical use case. Last but not least, the configurable grading. So what we see here is you can change the relative weight of the grade that is handed to the students. And you can even change that on certain evaluation perspectives. So if you feel like the format in this assignment is very important, you can increase the weight of that. And you can also, of course, decrease another perspective. This was the first use case, students creating an assignment in a group and then giving feedback across groups. Now I'm gonna move on to the second use case, which took place after this assignment. I'm gonna be looking at it from the student perspective first. So this is gonna be a group member evaluation. What I can see is I'm again, Robert, logged into the Canvas environment as a student, and I'm reviewing my group members, Maxwell and Melinda. In the first step of this assignment, I give feedback in the first place to myself, because self-assessment is very important, you know, especially when it comes to 21st century skills, going into the job market. You often have to reflect on yourself. Hey, how were my contributions? How I am working with others? How is my time management? And also after that, I review Melinda and Maxwell. In the next step, I have to read the reviews that I receive from other students. Now, again, if I feel like there is something unclear, there is something that I disagree with, I can ask for further elaboration by adding a comment to it. Something that we learned from our partners, that adapting new technologies can be quite challenging both for instructors and for students. That's why we have in each and every activity the possibility to turn to a feedback-free support help desk. We have a 24/5 chat box where roughly within under 2-3 minutes you can ask your questions and receive guidance. Next, I'm required to reflect on the assignment, and then I get my final grade. So that was the student perspective. I'm going to walk you through quickly the teacher perspective of the same assignment, group member evaluation. In this case, I'm logged into Canvas as Jordan teacher. And again, I can see this box, this dashboard on the top of the assignment. Moses mentioned previously that Feedback Fritz has multiple pedagogical tools, such as interactive video, quiz cards. They all follow a similar structure. So once you learn to use one of our tools, you can easily get used to using the rest of them. Now here is something very important that very often came out from a certain pedagogical use cases in terms of group work. Some students are overachieving. Some students are underperforming. There are free riders. And oftentimes it's very time consuming for instructors to manually figure that out, to walk to each and every group, especially asynchronously in an online learning environment, and figure out, hey, how are the groups doing? So on Feedback Fruits, what we created is an indication of the outliers. So we can see that Olivia, for example, review on average with 83% others, but only gives 54% on self-assessment. So the system automatically indicates that Olivia is underconfident in this case, encouraging the teacher to intervene here and ask Olivia, hey, what's going on? Now, to show you what other outliers our system can detect, here is a short list. We show when someone is a high performer, so when he or she is having outstanding ratings on the group level, low performer, underconfident, overconfident, manipulator, and when there is a group within, there's a conflict within the group. So sometimes we see that two students are evaluating each other badly, even though the rest of the group is evaluating them quite high. Now, again, this is a way to increase the quality of the feedback and eliminate biases, which was, I think, one of the questions in the chat box.
Yeah, what I really like about this, if I could step in for a second, with Georgia State, this was a feature that they were really excited to look at, because it allowed the teacher to, if you have a class with 50 students, you're not going to be able to, as a teacher, know what's going on behind the scenes for all of the different groups that are participating in this assignment. So this really allows the instructor to kind of sit back and see, okay, where is there any irregularities? Where might I be needed? Where might I need to look into it, right? Of course, this is an indicator. It's not going to be correct all the time, but the fact that a teacher can look at this from the back end and say, oh, this is something that I should do, rather than going deep into all the groups and seeing what's going on, this will allow the teacher to spend their time significantly more wisely when intervening and when interacting with the groups of students.
Thanks for adding that. I oftentimes hear this little saying that teachers should be teaching, not tasking. And I think that's a good example, where technology, where automation can actually show you, hey, you should intervene here, as opposed to you as a task going through all the groups one by one. Thanks for adding that, Moses. Last but not least, I can also read the individual reflections of the students. What did they learn from this activity? What they would do differently next time? And here is the last part, which is super important when it comes to group work. One of the reasons why students do not like to work in a group is that it tends to be imbalanced, right? There are sometimes overachievers and there are some slackers, free riders. How do you eliminate that? How do you incentivize students to do their fair share in the work? So what we see here is in group number 2, again, Robert, Maxwell, and Melinda were evaluating each other on how they contributed to the success of the group. And what our system automatically calculates is a so-called group contribution factor. So let's take an example here. We can see, for example, that time management, on average, the group is giving each other 20 points. However, Robert is only receiving 12 points from others, Maxwell and Melinda 25 points. Now, this might make you realize on this perspective, Robert is an underachiever, whereas Maxwell and Melinda are overachievers. Our system gives you an automated calculation, a group contribution factor, that allows you to adjust the final grade of this group that they receive on their deliverable, which would be 75% for the whole group. But since Robert is a free rider in this case, the system automatically suggests you to deduct 23% of the final grade. Now, of course, you as a instructor, you're always in full control of determining the grade of the student. So you can manually change that in case, for example, Robert was sick this week. Again, with a click of a button, these grades get pushed back to the learning management gradebook. In terms of editing the assignment, again, you see this familiar interface. You can set up the various feedback criteria. And here we can also see the outlier detection automated feedback coach. Now, also to say a couple of words about the automated feedback coach, we got a question in the chat of this call. Can you, as an instructor, set up various tips for students to write a certain quality of feedback? There are 2 ways to answer that question. Yes, you can add another tip here. So for example, I want the students to focus on ABC while providing that feedback. And I can also remove another one. Now this is important because again, the tool is customizable to the pedagogical mentality of the teacher. And on top of that, we also have a artificial intelligence layer built in the tool, which gives an automated feedback for the student if, for example, the review is too short. So if my review for a group member is good job, then I would get an automated feedback saying, hey, your feedback seems to be quite short and it might not give enough constructive guidance to the person who is receiving it. Please reconsider writing a bit more. So we have two other ways to increase the quality of feedback in this assignment. That's just something I wanted to highlight. Moses, being cautious with time and also just looking at this assignment, do you think I should highlight anything else from the teacher perspective?
No, I think you've just about covered it. You've got all the important points, and I think no, I think we're good.
Yeah, awesome. Also checking in the chat of this call. Oh, actually, sorry, I missed the question 15 minutes ago. How does the grading work? Is it granular? Wow, that's a tricky question. That's a good one. Thank you for asking that. Yes, it is granular. I'll also, again, demonstrate how to change the relative weight of the grade. So if you feel like time management should have a relatively higher rating and working with others relatively lower, you can just manually easily change the relative weight, and that's how you make the grading more granular. Now with that, I would pass back the microphone to Moses to wrap up and also tell a bit about how other partners of Feedback Fruits experience working with us.
Yeah, so from this slide, if you just go back one more slide, the goal of each of these tools that we've just shown you, the peer review tool, We want to improve students' peer review on artifacts and deliverables. And the group member evaluation was very similar, except that we're providing group feedback on the collaboration skills of the students themselves. So if we want to look at what is Feedback Fruit's impact so far? So obviously we have already been working with Georgia State. We've explained this use case to you. We also have a nice list of other institutions that we work with on a global scale, from the United States to Europe and all the way over to Australia. You might see some familiar logos here, so feel free to just glance around. But we've made quite the global impact, I like to say. Now, many institutions, when we're speaking with their team, they ask us, why do you need Feedback Fruits? And things that come up quite often is, what are the reasons that learning designs and instructional design teams say that they, or indicate that they need to use Feedback Fruits? So on the left side, we have a couple of points which are they're recurring in these conversations. So when they're looking for scaled self-and-peer assessment, or if they are trying to transition to flexible asynchronous course programs, you want to improve feedback and feedback opportunities for students. In this case, would be instant feedback on student work, engaged annotation for faculty, discussion formats, collaborate